My name is Karen, and I'm 33 years old. I guess I should start by telling you about my family. There's my parents, obviously, and my younger sister Emma. My parents are pretty typical. Mom works part-time at a dentist's office, and dad's been at the same accounting firm for like 20 years. Emma's always been the one who gets more attention, probably because she's the baby of the family or whatever. Every Sunday, we do this family dinner thing at my parents' house. It's been going on for years, and honestly, sometimes I'd rather just stay home and watch Netflix, but you know how it is with family obligations. This particular Sunday started out like any other. Mom made her usual pot roast, Dad complained about his golf game, and Emma was scrolling through her phone half the time. But then Emma suddenly put her phone down and got this huge grin on her face. She was practically bouncing in her seat, which is pretty typical for her when she has news to share. "Guys, I have something to tell you," she said, and I could tell she was trying to build up suspense or whatever. She held up her left hand, and there was this sparkly ring on her finger. Not huge, but definitely nice looking. "Oh my God, Emma," Mom practically screamed. She jumped up from her chair so fast she almost knocked over her wine glass. "When did this happen?" "Last night," Emma said, still grinning. "We went to that new restaurant downtown, and he proposed right there at the table. It was so romantic. I was genuinely happy for her." Emma had been dating this guy Mark for about 2 years, and he seemed decent enough. A little boring maybe, but he treated her well, and that's what matters, right? "Congratulations, Em," I said, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "I'm really happy for you. Speaking of which, I hope you'll let me be your bridesmaid." Emma's face kind of froze for a second, and she looked uncomfortable. She glanced at Mom and Dad, then back at me. "Oh, well. I haven't really thought about all that stuff yet," she said, fidgeting with her napkin. "I mean, we literally just got engaged last night. There's so much other stuff to figure out first, you know? Like the budget and the venue and all that important stuff." After that dinner, I decided to just wait. I figured Emma or my parents would bring up the wedding planning soon enough. Maybe they'd even ask me to help organize stuff for the wedding party. I kept expecting phone calls or texts about dress shopping, venue visits, or just general wedding talk. But weeks turned into months, and nothing. No messages, no calls, no invitations to go look at venues or taste cakes or anything. The Sunday dinners continued like normal, but nobody really talked about the wedding much. If it came up at all, it was just Emma mentioning something super brief like, "Oh, we're still looking at venues," or whatever. Then one Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. It was my grandmother. "Hi, Grandma," I said, surprised. She usually only calls on birthdays or holidays. "Karen, honey, how are you feeling?" she asked, and her voice sounded worried. "I'm fine," I said, confused. "What's wrong?" "Well, I just wanted to check on your health. Your parents told me you've been seriously ill and that's why you couldn't make it to the wedding." My stomach dropped. "What wedding, Grandma?" There was silence on the other end for a few seconds. "What do you mean, what wedding?" "Emma's wedding, of course, it was last weekend." I felt like someone had punched me in the gut. "Grandma, I wasn't invited to Emma's wedding. I haven't gotten any calls, texts, or invitations about anything." Mom, Dad, and Emma have been completely silent about wedding plans for months. Grandma was quiet again. "Oh my goodness, Karen. I don't understand, this doesn't make any sense." After I hung up with Grandma, I sat in my car in the parking lot outside my office, feeling completely shocked. I pulled out my phone and opened Instagram. I hardly ever go on there, but I needed to see what had happened. I searched for Emma's profile and found it immediately. The first thing I saw was dozens of photos from what was obviously a wedding. Emma in a white dress, Mark in a tux, both of them looking happy and surrounded by people I recognized. I scrolled through photo after photo, my heart sinking deeper with each one. There was Mom crying happy tears. Dad walking Emma down the aisle. The whole wedding party posing together. Emma cutting a huge cake. People dancing and laughing. Under the last photo, Emma had written, "Mr. and Mrs. Anderson are ready for their honeymoon. Thank you to everyone who made our special day perfect." I kept scrolling through the photos, and that's when I really started to feel sick. I saw our neighbors from my parents' street. Dad's golf buddies from the country club. His co-workers from the accounting firm. Mom's friends from her book club. Even relatives I hadn't seen in years, cousins from 3 states away, my great-aunt from California, people who barely kept in touch with our family. Everyone was there, everyone except me. The worst part was seeing how big the wedding was. This wasn't some small, intimate ceremony where maybe they could only invite a few people. This was a huge party with what looked like over 100 guests. They had invited basically everyone except me. I don't remember much about the drive to my parents' house. I was running on pure adrenaline and anger. All I could think about was those wedding photos and how everyone in the world had been there except me. My hands were shaking as I pulled into their driveway. I didn't even knock, I just walked right in through the front door like I always do. "Karen," Mom called from the kitchen. "What are you doing here? It's not Sunday." She came around the corner, wiping her hands on a dish towel, and the second she saw my face, her expression changed. She knew I knew. "Why wasn't I invited to Emma's wedding?" I said, getting straight to the point. Mom's face went pale. She looked around like she was hoping Dad would magically appear to help her out of this situation. "Karen, let me explain." "Dad," I called out, raising my voice, "get in here." Dad appeared from the living room, looking annoyed. "What's all the yelling about?" "Tell me why I wasn't invited to Emma's wedding," I said. Dad and Mom looked at each other, and I could see them having one of those silent conversations married couples do. "Look, Karen, you know you don't really like big parties and crowds and all that stuff," Mom said weakly. "We just figured you wouldn't want to come anyway." I stared at her. "Are you serious right now? You decided for me that I wouldn't want to come to my own sister's wedding?" "Well, you never seemed interested when we talked about it," Dad said. "You never talked about it. For months, nobody said anything to me about wedding plans. I kept waiting for someone to bring it up, but you all just acted like it wasn't happening." Mom sat down heavily at the kitchen table. "Karen, you have to understand." "No, I don't have to understand anything, just tell me the real reason." Dad crossed his arms. "Fine, you want the truth? Emma's got her life together. She's successful, she's marrying a lawyer, she's got her career on track. If you'd been at that wedding, what would you have had to talk about? You would have just stood there feeling sorry for yourself." My jaw dropped. "Excuse me? We didn't want to watch you stand there all alone, feeling bad about yourself because you're not married and don't even have a boyfriend," Mom added quietly. "But you invited Sarah," I said, thinking of our cousin. "She's 5 years older than me and she's also single." Mom looked down at her hands. She had nothing to say to that. "You know what the real problem is," I said. "You guys are so used to me never asking you for anything that you just forgot I existed. You forgot about my feelings completely." "That's not fair," Dad said. "Isn't it? When was the last time any of you asked me how I was doing? When was the last time you included me in anything important? I'm your daughter, and you treated me like I was some distant relative you barely tolerate." The room was quiet for a minute. Mom was still looking at her hands, and Dad was staring at the wall. "Well," I said, feeling strangely calm all of a sudden. "I guess now you know not to expect me to invite you to my wedding." Mom looked up and actually smiled. "Karen, honey." Dad straight up laughed. "I don't think I'll be waiting around for that invitation anytime soon. Let's be realistic here, you're probably never going to get married." I didn't argue with them. What was the point? They clearly had no idea what was actually going on in my life, and at this point, I didn't feel like enlightening them. "Okay," I said simply, "we'll see about that." I turned around and walked out of the house. The whole drive back to my apartment, I kept thinking about how wrong they were about everything. They had no clue about my life, and they'd just proven they didn't care enough to find out. A year ago, I got promoted to deputy director at the company where I work. It was a huge deal, and I was excited to tell my family about it. But every time I brought it up, Emma would interrupt with some story about her own job or her boyfriend or whatever drama was going on in her life. Eventually, I just stopped trying. I also bought my apartment 8 months ago. It's in one of the nicest neighborhoods in the city, and I'm really proud of it. But again, when I tried to tell my family about it, the conversation always got hijacked by Emma's latest news. And then there's the biggest thing they don't know about. I've been dating someone for a few years now. David. We met back in college. He was in a program parallel to mine, and we were friends for a long time. I had no idea his family had money or anything like that. After college, we lost touch for a while. Then 7 years ago, when I started working at my current company, I was shocked to see David there. He was already in a high-level position, and I later found out that his dad actually owns the company. We became friends again, started dating, and about 6 months ago, he proposed. We've been engaged for 6 months, and not one person in my family has even noticed the ring on my finger. Not once has anyone asked me why I'm suddenly wearing jewelry on my left hand. They're all so wrapped up in Emma's life that they don't pay attention to anything else. David and I decided to keep our relationship quiet. His family is well known in the city. They're always in the local news for something. But they're also very private people. They don't have social media accounts, and they don't like people gossiping about their personal lives. I'm not from a wealthy family obviously, but I liked their approach. I didn't want people talking about my relationship either, so I kept it to myself. I rarely post on social media anyway, and I definitely don't post personal stuff. I actually tried to tell my family about my boyfriend several times over the years. But every single time I brought him up, Emma would jump in with some story about herself. After a while, I gave up trying. And my parents never once asked me what I'd been trying to tell them. They just let Emma take over every conversation, and they forgot all about me. After that confrontation with my parents, I went home and had a long talk with my fiancé about what happened. "So what do you want to do?" he asked after I told him the whole story. "I want to cross them off our guest list," I said without hesitation. David nodded. "I think that's fair. After what they did to you, they don't deserve to be there." We'd already been planning a small wedding anyway. We wanted something intimate with just our closest people, maybe 30 guests total. David's parents were paying for everything, which was incredibly generous of them. His mom and sister were handling most of the planning, which took a lot of stress off me. The next day, I called my grandma, my aunt, and my 2 cousins on my mom's side. These were the only family members I actually wanted at my wedding. I sent them formal invitations 2 months before the ceremony date. "Karen, this is so exciting," my aunt said when she got the invitation. "I had no idea you were even dating anyone serious." "We've been together for a while," I said. "We just like to keep things private." "Well, I'm so happy for you, honey. The venue looks beautiful from the pictures." We'd chosen this gorgeous old mansion for the ceremony. David's family had connections with the owners, and it was absolutely perfect. His mom and sister went all out with the decorations. They strung lights and garlands through all the trees in the garden, made this amazing wedding arch out of lanterns, and even had the waiters dress in vintage outfits that matched the time period when the mansion was built. It was going to be like something out of a movie. Everything was going smoothly until about a month before the wedding. That's when my phone rang, and it was my mother. I almost didn't answer, but I figured I might as well get this over with. "Karen," she screamed into the phone before I could even say hello. "Your father and I are in complete shock. How could you not invite your own parents to your wedding? We found out by accident when we saw the invitation at your grandmother's house." I stayed calm. "I told you not to expect an invitation to my wedding. You were there when I said it. You can't be serious about this, Karen. We're your parents. And Emma is my sister, but that didn't stop you from excluding me from her wedding. Karen, please, we can work this out. We made a mistake with Emma's wedding, but," I hung up on her. About an hour later, Emma called. "Karen, what the hell," she said as soon as I picked up. Why didn't you invite me to your wedding? A normal sister wouldn't do this. I didn't even bother explaining anything to her. I just hung up immediately. A few days later, I found out from my cousin what my family's reaction really was. Apparently, my cousin had mentioned that my wedding was only going to have 30 people, and Emma went off about it. They're having some cheap, pathetic wedding in someone's backyard, Emma had said. It's so embarrassing. My wedding had 150 people, and Karen's only having 30. They probably couldn't afford anything better. After my cousin told me what Emma said, I felt even better about my decision to exclude them. They clearly didn't understand what kind of wedding we were actually having, and honestly, I didn't care if they never found out. The wedding day arrived, and it was absolutely perfect. The weather was beautiful, the mansion looked incredible with all the decorations, and everyone who was there actually wanted to be there. My grandmother cried happy tears during the ceremony. My aunt gave the sweetest toast at dinner. My cousins helped me with my dress and took tons of pictures. I didn't post any photos on social media because that's not my style, but my cousin posted a few on her Instagram. She's always been into that stuff, and I didn't mind her sharing some of the celebration. That's when everything blew up. A few days after the wedding, my phone started going crazy with calls and texts from my parents and Emma. I ignored most of them, but I could see the messages on my lock screen. Why didn't you tell us about your rich fiancé? From Emma. You've embarrassed us in front of the entire city, from Mom. Call us back immediately, from Dad. I finally looked at my cousin's Instagram to see what they were seeing. She'd posted several photos from the wedding, including some of David with his parents. Anyone in our city would recognize David's dad immediately. Like I said, he's always in the local news. He's friends with the mayor, he's on the university board of trustees, he runs multiple successful companies and a charity foundation. He's basically one of the most prominent businessmen in the area. My family had finally figured out who I'd married, and they were losing their minds about it. My mom was the worst. She started posting on Facebook about how I'd betrayed my family by not inviting them to my wedding. She wrote these long posts about how a loving daughter would never do this to her parents. She even posted that my dad was heartbroken because he'd always dreamed of walking me down the aisle. Every single day, she posted something new about me. She called me ungrateful, cruel, selfish, basically every name in the book. It was embarrassing, but I just ignored it and hoped it would blow over. But then David's dad had enough. Karen, David said one evening, my dad wants to call your parents because they're posting about you and our family on social media, and he's not going to tolerate it anymore. I was nervous about this, but David's dad is not someone you argue with. He called my parents that same night. I don't know exactly what he said to them, but David told me the basics. He told my parents that they were embarrassing me and his family with their social media posts. He said if they continued, he would tell everyone in town exactly what had really happened, how they'd excluded me from Emma's wedding and lied about it. He also mentioned that he had contacts at newspapers and TV stations, and that he'd make sure everyone at my dad's golf club and my parents' church knew the real story. After that phone call, the social media posts stopped immediately. My parents and Emma stopped calling and texting me too. It was finally quiet. Life was good for about 6 months after the wedding. David and I settled into married life, and I was still working at his company. I'd gotten used to the peace and quiet of not dealing with my family's drama. Then one day, HR called me into their office. Karen, we received a resume yesterday, and the applicant listed you as a reference, the HR director said, sliding a folder across the desk to me. I opened it and saw Emma's name at the top. My stomach dropped. She wrote that you could provide a strong recommendation for her work ethic and character, the HR director continued. I looked at Emma's resume for a few seconds, then closed the folder. Please review her application through the normal process. I won't be providing a special recommendation. A week later, HR called me back to let me know that Emma hadn't been selected for an interview. Her qualifications just weren't strong enough compared to other candidates. I wasn't surprised. Emma had always been more focused on having fun than building real skills. 2 days after that, my phone rang. It was my mother. "Karen, how could you do this to your sister?" she said without even saying hello. "Emma applied for a job at your company, and you sabotaged her chances." "I didn't sabotage anything. I told HR to review her application normally, and she didn't make the cut." "You should have helped her. She's your sister." "She's the sister who didn't invite me to her wedding, remember? And you're the mother who told me I'd probably never get married." Mom was quiet for a few seconds. "Karen, that's all in the past. Emma needs this job." "Then she should have applied somewhere else." I hung up. 3 days later, Emma showed up at my apartment. I opened the door, and she pushed right past me into my living room. "We need to talk," she said. "You can't be serious about this, Karen. You have to help me get that job." "I don't have to do anything for you." "Yes, you do. You're my sister. Family is supposed to help family." I almost laughed at that. Family is supposed to help family? Where was that philosophy when you were planning your wedding? That was different. "No, it wasn't different. You and Mom and Dad made it very clear that I'm not really part of this family. So don't come here now asking for favors." Emma's face got red. "You know what? You've always been jealous of me, and this is just your way of getting revenge." "I'm not jealous of you, Emma. I just don't want to have anything to do with you anymore." Emma stormed out, slamming my door so hard that my neighbor came out to see what happened. After that, another 6 months went by peacefully. David and I were settling into our routine, and I was actually starting to feel happy again. Then I found out I was pregnant. We were both excited about the baby, and David's parents were thrilled about becoming grandparents. The only person I told from my side of the family was my grandmother, because she's always been good to me. I should have known Grandma would tell my parents. A few weeks later, a package arrived at my apartment. Inside were tiny hand-knitted baby booties and a photo of my mother sitting in her chair, knitting. There was no note, but the message was pretty clear. This was supposed to be some kind of peace offering. I stared at that photo for a long time. Part of me wanted to believe that maybe my parents had finally realized how badly they'd screwed up. Maybe they genuinely wanted to make things right. But then I remembered how they'd laughed when I said they wouldn't be invited to my wedding. I remembered my dad saying I'd probably never get married. I remembered months of being completely ignored while they planned Emma's wedding behind my back. "What do you think I should do?" I asked David that night, showing him the booties and the photo. "That's up to you," he said. "Do you want them in our child's life?" "I don't know. Part of me misses having a family, you know? But then I think about how they treated me, and I get angry all over again." "Whatever you decide, I'll support you." I put the booties away in a drawer and tried not to think about it. Then last week, I was scrolling through Facebook and saw a post from my mother. She'd written about how happy and excited she was that both of her daughters were expecting babies. Apparently, Emma was pregnant too. For the first time in over a year, my mother had written something positive about me. She didn't mention our fight or the wedding drama. She just talked about being excited to be a grandmother to 2 babies. I read that post about 10 times, trying to figure out what it meant. Was this her way of apologizing? Was she finally ready to treat me like an actual daughter? Or was this just about the baby, and she'd go back to ignoring me once the novelty wore off? The truth is, I don't know what to do. David's family has been amazing. They've welcomed me completely and treated me like I've always belonged. But they can't replace the family I grew up with, no matter how wonderful they are. I keep thinking about that photo of my mom knitting baby booties. She looked so peaceful and happy in it, like she was genuinely excited about becoming a grandmother. Maybe people can change. Maybe she really does want to fix things between us. But then I think about Emma's wedding photos, and how my parents told everyone I was too sick to attend when really they just didn't want me there. I think about how they laughed at the idea of me getting married. I think about how they never noticed my engagement ring, never asked about my job, never showed any interest in my life until they found out who I'd married. Can you really forgive something like that? Should you? I honestly don't know. My husband says it's my choice, and he'll support whatever I decide. My grandmother thinks I should give them another chance. My aunt thinks they don't deserve one. What I do know is that I'm not the same person I was a year and a half ago. I'm not going to beg for their attention anymore. I'm not going to try to prove that I'm worthy of being included in my own family. If they want a relationship with me and my child, they're going to have to earn it. So I guess we'll see what happens. Maybe they've learned something from all this. Maybe they finally understand that actions have consequences. Or maybe this is just another game to them, and they'll go back to treating me like I don't matter once they get what they want.